Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to my channel. And yeah, DC is dead. They truly are dead. I hope with all my heart they won't be dead forever, but as long as Dan Didio's in charge, he has proven time and time and again that he wants the DC universe to be nothing like the DC universe. He wants to make it into Marvel. He wants to make it not even into current Marvel, but the Marvel he grew up with. He is ashamed of the iconic brilliance of these characters. He's ashamed of the hopefulness. He's ashamed of all of that is intrinsic in the DC universe. And he has tried time and time and time again to alter the DC universe at its core, in its DNA. This is exactly what the New 52 was. And he tried for a while to work up to the New 52 and was finally successful. Identity Crisis, this was part of this. He prepped and primed the universe for a New 52. The New 52 brought in some new fans, but not enough, and it was not sustainable. The comic sales proved that. After the spectacle wore off, people realized that you can make a brownie taste like a biscuit all you want, but it'll never actually be a biscuit, and in the process, you've lost the brownie. I really like food metaphors if you haven't been able to tell that already. So, DC Universe is dead now. The Rebirth was designed to bring back the hope. Rebirth did this. It did this for a while. We were told that it was going to be a 2-year story arc, and it was going to culminate in Jeff Johns' Superman Doomsday Clock. This whole storyline, the whole direction of Rebirth was thwarted by Dan Didio, and we had, instead of Superman Doomsday Clock to culminate the tale, we had Batman Dark Knight's Metal. Because Batman, he's got to be the center of the DC universe. He's not. Superman is the heart of the DC universe. No, we had to get rid of him. His character had returned in New 52. Mopey, angst-ridden Superman was no more, so Dan Didio's not interested in that character, that title anymore. We had to make it Batman-centric. And we had Dark Knight's Metal. Dark Knight's Metal was awful storytelling. It was. It sold very well. And again, people were interested in what was going to happen, especially tied into Rebirth. I certainly read it. And I appreciated the hopeful note that it ended on. But the process of the story, all of the elements that it introduced, thoroughly unwound and undid all of the hopeful, positive direction that the Rebirth was heading in. And as a result, we have this bleak, depressing DC universe that is simply no fun to spend any time in. Dan Didio had a famous list of things that he wanted to kill off in the DC universe. He wanted to get rid of Nightwing because Nightwing made Batman look old and he didn't like all of the dick jokes in Dick Grayson's name. Seriously, this is one of the things that he's wanted to nix for a long time. He wanted to kill off Wally West because Dan Didio does not like legacy characters. The DC characters need to be young and hip and dark and, again, everything that Marvel was at one point. He wanted to end the Superman and Lois Lane marriage. Superheroes are not allowed to have happy personal lives. This is a direct quote from him when he was speaking of Batwoman. A ridiculous quote. The man has no understanding of mythology and no understanding of the DC characters. He truly doesn't. I know he's worked at DC for years and years and years. But in all that time, it seems he's learned nothing. Instead of celebrating what the characters are, he strove at every turn to turn them into what he wanted them to be instead. So he had that list of things to kill, and there were more things on it, but we'll just stick with those 3. Now, what has he done? What has he done with Bendis on Superman and Tom King on Batman and Tom King's Heroes in Crisis? He's killed off Wally West again. No more Wally West. No more legacy characters like that. He couldn't kill Nightwing, so instead he shot him in the head and gave him amnesia. So now Dick Grayson's no longer Nightwing. And he changed his name to Rick Grayson from Dick Grayson. I'm sorry, but if you're that sensitive and insecure about a name, seriously, Dan Didio, get over it. Grow up. Mature past middle school and just deal with it. And of course, Superman. He could not kill the Superman-Lois Lane marriage. He tried that before. People fought against it. It would be too obvious were he to literally break that up. So through Bendis, he decimated the Superman family. Superman and Lois Lane are still married, but they're not a family. They've decided that they don't need each other. They don't need each other. Lois Lane doesn't need Superman. Superman doesn't need Lois Lane. So they won't live together. They'll still sort of be together, but in effect, you have a Superman who's a loner and with a Lois Lane girlfriend, like, is really what the relationship boils down to. Jonathan Kent, oh, he was a big problem for Dan Didio. We can't have our superheroes having children and children. No, this messes things up. So Jonathan Kent has returned, aged up, because if we have to have a kid around, he's got to be angsty, he's got to be dark. That's the only DC universe that Dan Didio knows how to paint. So gone forever is the sweet little Jonathan Kent. The amazingly successful Super Sons run, once this little mini-series that looks back at a time in history is over, that's it. Super Sons is dead. A ridiculous, boneheaded move on Dan Didio's part. So he's achieving. He's ticking off his list, little by little. No matter what he claims, he is business as usual. He is still working through his list, and he is steering the DC Universe to another reboot. He wants to bring back, either flat out bring back the New 52, or head in a different reboot or a different universe-spanning event that will mimic New 52's spirit and versions of the characters completely. So hearing all this, you might question the title of this video. Why wouldn't I continue to review these books and talk about how horrible they are? Well, Dan Didio is also quite ignorant when it comes to marketing and business. He's made this comment a number of times. He thinks that at least as long as you're talking about the books, that's good. You can talk about how much you hate them and how much you're not buying them, but that's good because you're talking about them. See, they're relevant and they're... No, Dan Didio, no. You can't make enemies of your fan base and think that you've achieved something. I don't have the emotional energy, nor the time, or the interest even, to read through these titles and just find out each week how Dan Didio has dismantled even more of what I loved about the DC Universe. These characters are no fun to spend time with. I'm not even remotely invested in their adventures. I don't care what happens with Red Cloud and Superman and blah-bitty-blah. Couldn't care less about what Jonathan Kent's going to do now that he's back. I don't care about Batman or Catwoman. This is just a big soap opera event. I don't care about Bane. I don't care about the culmination of this. I think somebody needs to start a GoFundMe to help Tom King afford some therapy, because apparently he can't afford any, which is why he demands to use the entire DC universe to work out his issues, and he should be paying us readers to have to listen to all this crap and read this garbage. So the DC universe is dead. It has become irrelevant. Now, I will always love the iconic DC heroes that I know and love at the core of who they are, but those heroes, those characters, that universe is no longer to be found in DC Comics. It's not. People need to understand that. There's no bringing it back little by little. As long as Dan Didio's in charge, you'll no longer find those characters, that universe, at DC Comics. DC Comics is irrelevant. The only way apparently that anybody in the higher-ups will get a clue and fire Dan Didio and right this ship is if they see not only in sales but in popular culture DC Comics becoming a joke, becoming more and more irrelevant. So I'm simply going to ignore them, brush them aside. They're no longer worth a mention. I'm not going to review their books. I will review some of the classic titles, classic books that I've loved for a while. I might talk about those from time to time. And as such, I might talk about the 100-page Comic Giants still, because they are a compilation, for the most part, of classic titles, and I'll point out the horrible New 52 stories they keep shoehorning in some of the new tales or whatever like that. But as far as the DC's weekly new titles, I'm simply not going to review them anymore. I don't think they deserve attention. Everybody simply needs to turn their back on Dan Didio and his deluded little mission for the universe before anything will ever change. I covered some of the main characters there. I didn't even touch on the political soapboxing that G. Willow Wilson is going to run Wonder Woman through now, or the nonsense that Kelly Sue DeConnick is going to introduce to Aquaman. Any of this nonsense. It's simply not worth my time anymore. It's certainly not worth my money. It hasn't been worth my money for a while now, but it's definitely not worth my time anymore. And even the good titles, even the titles that, in spite of being in this dark, bleak universe, managed to have some good storytelling, they're not enough. They're not worth it for me to hang on a little longer. At best, they're scraps thrown to keep some people quiet and shut those people up so he can continue his mission. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to work anymore. So that is my philosophy about it at this point, and that is my plan of action for it. of course, all my followers and audience members out there, I know many of you, multitude of you, feel the exact same way I do about what he's doing to the DC Universe. And it's up to you. It's up to you to decide for your own if you're going to continue reading, reviewing, and ranting, or if you're simply going to ignore them. I heavily recommend simply turning your back on DC, at least until Dan Didio is out of there and they have somebody who's going to honor the characters in the universe as it should be honored, and stop trying to remake them into some twisted, diluted, despair-ridden vision that this man has in his head. This complete misunderstanding of mythology on every level. So those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I'll be back with a really cool one-shot tomorrow that was released this past week from a different publisher that I think a lot of people will enjoy. But until then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love, as long as it's not new DC. Thanks for watching.